We're lucky to be joined once again by Tamara Hubbard. And I have to say, I just love talking to Tamara. She has this way of instantly calming me down. Today, we're diving into her book, May Contain Anxiety, which comes out in September. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, anxious, or alone as a food allergy parent, this episode is for you. Tamara is not only a licensed therapist, she's an allergy mom. And in her book, she shares practical evidence-based tools to help you manage fear, navigate family dynamics, and feel more confident in your parenting. If you aren't an allergy parent, but you still manage food allergies or have a chronic disease, I bet you'll find a gem in this episode nonetheless. Now let's get to the interview. You're listening to The Itch, a podcast exploring all things allergy, asthma, and immunology. We have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Tamara like camera. Tamara Hubbard is with us. We put out a little episode a couple of weeks ago with the two of us, just her and I, talking about my anaphylactic reaction. So you might already know her voice, and she's back with us to talk about her book today. But before we jump into your book, which is called May Contain Anxiety, which is a fabulous name, by the way, we'd love to know just a little bit about how you got to the world of food allergy. What is your journey up until this point so that you are our food allergy expert?
Yeah, I had no intention of getting into food allergy. I think many of us, that's kind of how we get here. It's very personal because my younger son has food allergy. So I started off in substance abuse. I've been in the clinical mental health field for over 20 years, 20 something years now. And my degree is actually in marriage and family therapy. So I'm always thinking about the whole family system in any of the work that I do, even though in my practice, I work individually, primarily with adults and parents. So I came up the ranks working at hospitals, community mental health centers, doing substance abuse work, doing group therapy, working in group private practices, eventually opened up my own. And by the way of my son having the food allergy, it sort of exposed me to this life of living with food allergies. And then in 2018, was attending Dr. Ruchi Gupta's first conference, the FACES conference, and started to think, who's caring about the mental health and emotional well-being of those with food allergies? And that kind of just snowballed all the way into the food allergy counselor, then the Academy of Food Allergy Counseling and its directory, and then now a book.
I personally love these stories because we've heard about the story of even how the Allergy and Asthma Network came to be. And that was also a dedicated mom that wanted to do more and wanted to provide more education, even outside of her family. So you could have just made sure that your family had what it needed, but you wanted to go to that next level and provide for other families. So I really, really appreciate that. And I think it's awesome. And I think it's beautiful.
And don't get me wrong, I was that mom and sometimes still am that mom, right? Like, so there's therapist me and then there's mom me, just like there would be Dr. You and mom you and you and wife you. Like we have all these parts of ourselves. I was that mom initially who was scared and anxious and still have those moments now that my son is a teenager and getting ready for college in a couple of years. But the way that I describe it, and I know it sounds kind of hokey, but it was like a heart-led thing. Something told me I needed to keep focusing on this space and pushing forward and creating resources and bridging the gap or doing something. And it started off just by putting out blog articles. And then people were contacting me from all over the US and said, can I do therapy with you? And I can't. Same with doctors, probably. We have to be licensed in the state where the people are, even with telehealth. So I couldn't do that work. The joke in our house is that when this all started back in like the mid 2010s, my husband was like, well, what a great little hobby. You have this website and you're writing these blog articles. And I was like, honey, it's not a hobby. I don't quite know the vision yet, but my heart is pulling me in this direction. And I'm telling you, there's a need for me to go in this direction. So now I like to throw that in and go, so how do you think the hobby is going? And he just laughs and goes, yeah, I was wrong.
Tamara, can you just tell us your three must knows about Tamara Hubbard? I feel like when people reach for a book, they just want to know about the author. So I'd love to do that for the audience.
Yeah. So the quick facts are I'm from a loving family. I have two kids. I've been married 20 years this year to a British guy. So my second home is the UK. Call myself an honorary UK citizen. Yeah, I'm somebody who loves to laugh. It's literally in our family's DNA. Love reality television and shouldn't watch as much as I do. And just love to help people figure out what makes them and their life work best. I'm very real. I try to do everything that I do from a place of of heart and genuineness. It's got to resonate with me. Otherwise, it doesn't feel like important work. And so all the work I do is usually tied to something very important and meaningful and genuine. But at the core, I'm somebody who likes to just spend time outside, walking with my weighted vest, gardening, watching too much reality television shows.
And why did you decide to become a child and family therapist?
You know what? Somebody asked me this recently, and I can't remember the exact thing or thought or moment where I switched to that. Because quite honestly, my undergrad's in elementary education, but I knew coming out of like my senior year of college, I didn't want to teach, but I didn't want to go and start college over again. So I got out and I was working with a photographer or doing odd jobs for that year, talking myself out of going back to school. I actually started doing graphic design work because I can draw and I can do art stuff. So I thought maybe I'd go in that direction. And I can't remember the thing, though, that made me think maybe I should be a therapist. I do remember when I was doing student teaching, I cared more about family life and what was happening in somebody's home life, being there to support them than really teaching math or English. So I think there's just always been a part of me that's kind of been the supportive person, the supportive friend, or that nurturing person. And then when I was looking at going back to grad school, I knew that I wanted to do family systems work and marital therapy and stuff. So for a while, I did a lot of couples counseling and focusing on the family. You know, at 23, when I got out, I was going to help save the world and everybody in it. And, you know, one relationship at a time. So that's what drove me to do that work.
And that's actually really important, probably in your book, as well as the family unit, because I think that when you have a chronic condition that gets inserted into a family, the family unit itself gets shaken up and relationships change and status quo changes and power dynamics shift and trust. Trust is a big thing. And I think that also comes into play. So I feel like you were really very well equipped for all of that.
Yeah, I really pull from my background in marriage and family therapy. And all the things you listed are things that I weave in and touch on in different chapters of the book. 1 in 4 marriages are strained because of food allergies and allergic conditions. And I also created a term called the allergy expert parent, right? A lot of times, and I hate to be saying it, a lot of times it's the mom, the one who's doing the day-to-day caring. And so that can cause conflict in relationships, marriages, in the co-parenting aspect. So yeah, a lot of it is, again, knowing that I'm a marriage and family therapist by training, when you're reading the book, you're going to see that that sort of shows through everything I'm talking about, because it is the whole family system, even thinking about siblings, right, who don't have food allergies. These diagnoses impact the whole family. And so they really have to be a family system approach.
Before we jump into the book, because you are an honorary UK citizen and I lived in the UK for a little bit, I'd love to know what your favorite British candy is, because I feel like if you know British candy, you know that everyone has a favorite.
Yes. So hands down, it's Cadbury chocolate. And it is not the same in the US as it is over in the UK. I don't know what's different, but it's just different. I also like Maynard's wine gummies, and those are not gummies that have wine in them. They're just gummies, but they're just not so waxy and plasticky. They're delicious. So every time we go, I kid you not, we come back with a big box of chocolate bars to last us until our next trip.
100%. If anyone in my family flies through Heathrow, they must return with at least a kilo of chocolate.
Yep, same here. We bring like whole bags to like bring that back with.
And now let's talk about your book,
Which will also be sold in the UK. Maybe not next to the chocolate, but it will be sold worldwide in English. So yeah, too.
So it sounds like you provided so many different resources to patients and caregivers already. What made you want to decide to write a book at this time?
In all honesty, it was never a vision of mine, kind of similar to this work too, right? I know there are a lot of therapist friends of mine, psychologist friends of mine who always wanted to write a book as well. And that was never on my agenda. But somewhere around 2020 or so, a friend of mine saw the work that I was doing, the resources I was putting together, and she said, you should just write a book and put some of this stuff out there in one nice little, cover to cover place. And I thought, sure, how hard can that be? Very hard. So I decided to just kind of dip my toe in, did some research on self-publishing versus traditional publishing, and decided that if I was going to do this, I wanted to do the traditional publishing route, which meant I might not get a book deal and this book may never come to existence. But I was willing to take that risk because I knew that I didn't have the background to market it, get it out there on my own. Yes, did I have a following? Yes. Did I have great connections in this industry with practitioners and patients in the community? Yes. But I'm not a marketer. I'm not somebody who does that regularly. I didn't want to learn how to. So I went the long, painful route of getting an agent and then getting a book deal. And it really just came down to I felt really passionate about taking the topic of how to help the parents. Like, so a lot of the resources out there are focused on helping anxious kiddos or anxious adults, all wonderful resources, all information that needs to be out there. But I wanted to take a slightly different route and something that hadn't been really explored in the community because of my marriage and family therapy background. And I wanted to write something for the parents. Research shows that helping parents manage their own anxiety and their own feelings can be incredibly beneficial for not just the kiddos themselves, the entire family, and marital relationships. So that's how I figured out what the book needed to be about and who the main focus needed to be. And then I just kind of jumped head on into that journey, just like I did with the food allergy counselor and everything else I've done.
How much of your own journey really informed you in writing this book, do you think?
So, the backbone of it is that I'm obviously a therapist, but I'm also a mom. And I state that right up front in the introduction chapter. And I do share some insights into my own journey from the time that my son was diagnosed. We share the reaction story in the beginning. I share the thoughts and the things that I struggled with. But at the core of the book, it's written by a therapist and it's evidence-based. It's based in allergic disease research, food allergy research. It's also grounded in what's called acceptance and commitment therapy, or known as ACT. And that's kind of like a cousin to CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. So I use that a lot in my work with the parents. I find it to be very beneficial. So it's grounded in evidence. It's me as a therapist writing it, but I wrote the book just as if you and I were sitting here talking, which is my tone everywhere, whether I'm on social media or in presenting or I'm talking on a podcast or apparently writing a book. So it's as if we're sitting with a cup of tea or coffee and you're reading my thoughts, my words, but it's all based on evidence-based and weaved in with my own stories and other people's stories.
Tamara, I would love for you to give a quick definition of what ACT is.
So acceptance and commitment therapy is really about how do we help people develop what's called psychological flexibility, which the way that I talk about it is the ability to ride the waves of life, whether they're big waves, small waves, or it's calm waters, right? There's a lot of different pathways in which ACT practitioners will achieve that. And some of the main ones are making sure that people are paying attention to their values and what matters most to them. Because when anxiety shows up, or when struggle shows up, or challenging life experiences like living with food allergies and other allergic conditions, it's easy to just sort of focus on that and live your life in that anxious, scared space. And so we need other things like perspective taking, staying in the present moment, knowing what our values are besides just safety. Safety is always going to be number one, but there needs to be other things like maybe growing independence or being adventurous. And so staying connected with those. And then unhooking from thoughts that keep us really stuck and anxious and scared and moving away from what matters the most. So yes, there's components of it looking at our thoughts and our feelings, kind of similar to CBT, but the way, the vehicle in which we go about it and what we focus on is just slightly different.
And is that weaved through your book so you give maybe examples and then how to overcome that, or like what tools you need at what time in your life?
Yeah, so the book is organized in such a way that the first couple of chapters are really focused on what I call the things that make families feel stuck and overwhelmed and anxious. So one chapter is about our narratives and our mindset, particularly when they're first diagnosed, and that can kind of continue on throughout the years, and that can be problematic because a lot of them are unhelpful. Then I talk about the term that I've created, which is called food allergy parenting traps or allergy parenting traps. These are behavioral patterns that we feel are useful and in some respects can be, but then when used beyond necessary or in excess, actually make things harder for allergy families. And the next chapter is the developmental milestones, paying attention to those things as we parent. We need to pay attention to child development. We want them to have normal child developmental milestones being met, our own parental development, and then the development of allergy management skills. After that, I have more what I call the skills chapters, which is kind of does a bigger, deeper dive into acceptance and commitment therapy stuff, looking at how to deal with anxious thoughts differently, taking perspective, using values and committed action. And then I have a nice wrap up chapter where I have everyone go through all of that with some exploratory questions too.
So, hearing kind of about the structure of your book, I'm curious, is this something that you need to read chapter one through to the last chapter, or can you just pick it up and go, this is the chapter I need at this point in my life right now?
So it's not a reference book. Like I'm thinking of Dr. Scott Zischer's book through Johns Hopkins University Press, which is my publisher as well. And that's more of a reference guide where you can kind of flip through and it's got Q&As. That being said, it's not as if you can't open up a chapter and read it, but I do tend to weave things and set it up in a way that it's best read from the beginning to the end. And then there's a summary chapter of everything you've read, and then additional questions that help you sort of figure out how to parent your child with food allergies based on what you need to do versus the anxiety. But I wouldn't say, don't look ahead. It's just probably best read all the way through.
The one thing I'm curious is like a parent who's debating on picking up this book, what is the thing that you want them to get out of it? So if I'm like, do I need this in my life right now? I'm not really sure if we're that anxious or if maybe we're managing it right. I'm not sure. So that parent who's like, I don't know, do I read this? Should I read this? What do you hope that they get out of your book?
I hope that they get out of it that they are seen, heard, understood, and supported. Even if parents aren't overly anxious, those that are super anxious and feeling overwhelmed, particularly at the beginning of this journey, they're probably going to pick it up. Those that aren't sure, just know that this book isn't going to make you feel more anxious. It's probably going to make you feel even better and more confident about how you're navigating food allergies. And maybe there's a part of it that you can take away from it and go, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way, a new perspective, so that you can feel even better and more confident in your allergy parenting. And I should note too that I know the title says food allergies. I use the more general term allergies or allergy parenting throughout the book, and I do touch on a couple of other conditions. And while primarily a lot of it is focused on food allergies, I do believe, as does those who have read it so far, a host of allergists and psychologists, and Joe Frost, Super Nanny, has read it, that it could be helpful to others who have other allergic conditions or parenting children with other allergic conditions.
Or I would even say any chronic condition. I think that the anxiety associated with a child having any chronic condition is a lot.
There's stuff in the skills chapters too that even those who aren't parents can take away. My editor read one of my chapters, I can't remember which one, and that particular day was having a rough day or a rough week. And she was like, I found this really helpful for me to read today. She's not a parent of a child with food allergies. So I do think that there's some stuff that others who are not parenting a kid with food allergies could take away too. Because again, that ACT stuff applies to everybody. And even someone who's an adult with food allergies might read those beginning chapters and see a little bit about how they were raised and how their parents navigated things. And not that I want them to be upset with their parents or feel bad about anything, but it might help sort of make sense as to why maybe certain things went the way they did in their childhood and things they might be struggling with personally as an adult with food allergies too.
So, that being said, do you think that this is a book that you can give to family members who want to or maybe need to learn more about managing food allergies?
Yeah, I think it would give a lot of perspective, right? A perspective on that struggle. What is that struggle, that overwhelm, the anxiety piece? Because it weaves in the big fear is death. The big fear is doing something wrong. But even with that said, we really want to try to find that what I call just right balance between managing that fear and anxiety and living fully, whatever that looks like for every family. So this book could help other family members gain some insight and understanding into that struggle. And then it can also open up a lot more dialogues. That's the other thing. The allergists who have read it have said that this book puts some words and some structure to some of the things they want to talk to their patients about, their families about. And so I do think that could happen within families too.
We've recently done a whole series on food allergy called Ages and Stages.
Oh, that loved it. Yeah.
And even if you're a seasoned food allergy parent, different stages in life that are going to catch you, and you think you're prepared and then you're not prepared at all. So your book is not just for the newly diagnosed, right? Is it for anyone on this journey? Because like I mentioned, this journey has lots of different stages and sometimes you're caught off guard. So when do you think this book is appropriate to come into someone's life?
anywhere on the journey because, yes, it's really going to help set the framework and mindset for those who are starting this journey or newly into this journey. But I cover in the developmental chapter in particular, all the way through to young adulthood launching. And so I think it could help, again, like you said, those that are maybe transitioning to different stages and ages, help them through those struggles. And then even a parent who has already launched their adult child with food allergies can go back and process some of the stuff that they've been through and understand it a little differently. So it's for all. I might not have mentioned it's going to be available. English versions will be across the world in major retailers and independent bookstores too. And it comes out September 30th in most countries. In some of the countries, it's November, but for most, it's September 30th. But I think it's for all.
At the start, you had mentioned that you had all these other resources for parents, and this book is a complement to all of that, correct? And so, if a parent reads this and they feel like they're getting to that last chapter, putting your balanced, mindful allergy parenting plan into action, and they still feel like they need more support, is that where your network comes into play? And is that still active? And can you just tell us a little bit more about that too?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, the Academy of Food Allergy Counseling is what I initially started as the Food Allergy Counselor Network. And that is a network of allergy, food allergy, and allergic disease informed licensed therapists across the US, some in Canada, and a couple other countries. It's still in existence. It's at foodallergycounseling.org. There's a directory there so that people can find and look for therapists in their state. Because again, we have to work with those that are in our state. So you're going to want to look for your state and find which therapists are there. They absolutely should reach out. If you feel like they're still struggling with some of this stuff or something else came up as they're reading it, or simply maybe they can work together with their therapist to sort of apply the things that they've read and learned in the book and action that in their daily life.
From the perspective of the allergy child, and I read the first chapter of your book, I thought it was really interesting because you mentioned this before as like reading it and understanding your parent's journey also helps you connect with your parent a little bit more. So I would almost say like for allergy adults is an interesting read because it kind of sets us up for understanding a little bit about how we got to where we are and maybe the relationships that we have in our lives and how we deal with relationships. So funny enough, I'm not a parent, but I feel like the book actually gave me a lot of information about just understanding my own parents and maybe giving them more grace, if you will, or just understanding why they are, even though I'm in my 30s, that they are still so, they treat me like a child sometimes. That's how I feel. But I can see that they lived with so much anxiety. So I just think that your book not only is for parents, but if you are maybe stuck on your journey as a food allergy adult, like to understand yourself a little bit more through the lens of parents was very fascinating to me. And I didn't think that would actually be the result of reading the first chapter of your book. So I think that it's not only helpful for parents, but I think it's helpful for anyone who's living with food allergy, whether it's you yourself, mother-in-law, just to understand what that person has been going through. So as much as this is like a book for parents, it's a book for everyone, in my opinion, who has to manage a chronic disease like food allergy. I don't know if that was at all your intention.
No, thank you for sharing that. That means a lot. And I 100% agree. And also, allergists who have read it have said it's helpful to them too, to just have a better understanding and to have different conversations. So I appreciate that perspective on that. That really felt amazing to hear. Thank you.
I think that as a parent now who doesn't have a child with food allergy, I can only imagine what it might feel like to experience an anaphylactic event with a child and how scary that is. Because I know in the office, experiencing anaphylaxis when I'm doing oral food challenges or when I'm giving immunotherapy is so scary to me, to be honest with you. To this day, I still feel scared. I'm still human, right? So even though I know what to do, it is still a scary moment when someone's not doing well and when they're not feeling good. And so as a parent, I can only imagine that that anxiety is 1,000,000,000 times more elevated and scary for that person. And so I know that this book is going to be really well received. And I'm glad that you mentioned that allergists are reading it because until I went through my breastfeeding journey, I didn't really understand it until I experienced it. And I may never have a child with a food allergy. So you can't always put yourself in every single patient's shoes. But I think that this would probably be the closest. of understanding what our parents are going through and different tools that we could then offer them on how to help relieve some of the anxiety that they're experiencing. Because to be honest, as physicians, we don't get the training on this topic as much as we should. And that one thing that you mentioned earlier about how important it is for parents to get that support, and it really is a ripple effect, right? And so if parents aren't healthy with their relationship with this diagnosis, ultimately that is going to lead to an unhealthy child and their relationship to their food allergy. So for me, beyond just being helpful to the parent, I think that when a parent is listening to this, they should know that this journey for them to get to a better place is going to be so important for their child and their mental health surrounding this diagnosis.
And I think that's what I would say as we wrap up. The takeaway from this book, from this conversation, is that parents, we want quick fixes for our kids. Of course we do. We want to take away pain, discomfort, trauma, grief, sadness, all of it, struggle. But I'm encouraging parents to really pause and take the time to do their own work, whether it's reading this book, whether it's just processing things themselves, whether it's calling a therapist to start therapy, talking with their allergist and allergy care team about their worries and their struggles. I would encourage every parent out there to do their work to help them manage their own feelings, emotions, and mental health around all this, and just in general, so that they can show up as the kind of parent they want to be and not let fear and anxiety tell them how to parent their child with an allergic disease.
Well, I am so excited for September. And we are also going to be doing a book giveaway for anyone that is listening and that follows us on Instagram or LinkedIn and wants to be a part of that. You can put your luck out there and see if you can get a free copy of Tamara's awesome book. But thank you, Tamara, for telling us a little bit more about yourself and also about this amazing book that you've put out for families and for everyone. We really appreciate it. And we need more resources out there like this. So I think this is going to be awesome.
Thank you so much for having me and enjoyed our chat. And next time I see you gals, I'll bring you a chocolate bar from England.
Yay.
You better. Thank you.
I sure do.
Listening to today's episode. Remember that all information you hear today is for informational purposes only and are not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have a second, help spread the word by rating our podcast and sharing with your friends and family who might also be interested in learning more about allergies, asthma, and immunology. You can always stay up to date by checking out our Instagram, The Itch Podcast, where you can leave questions you are itching to know, or check out our website, which is www.itchpodcast.com, which contains more information about the subjects we covered in today's episode and every episode. Until next time, have a fabulous week.